Hello there. My name is Layla. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a simple watercolor geode painting. You're going to need to prep all of your supplies. I'm using Shinhan watercolor paints. Tape down your paper, prepare your palette with your main color. I'm using a purple. Get your water, and you're also going to need salt for this to add some interesting texture. I'm concentrating my geode in the lower left-hand corner, and so I am making my outside pattern, and I start by just wetting the paper in the layer that I want and adding pigment to the inside of that layer of water. One thing you're going to want to do in this painting is be very aware of how your water is drying and on the paper, and that's going to change how the pigment flows within that area. You're also going to want to move back and forth through the painting. So I start with the outside and then I move to the inside layers so that I give adequate drying time between moving and working directly next to the layer I just put. I go back and I add more concentrated areas, and then now I'm going to be working on this inside area. So this is where your main crystal cluster is within the geode, and I want this to be pretty thick and pretty pigmented. Again, I go back and I add more detail on where I want it to be. I want this to be very natural looking and kind of irregular, so I do go back to kind of temper that. And I try to add some small details like thin lines. We want this to be nature. In order to add the unique crystal structure without having to freehand paint it, I'm using salt here. And what it does is the pigment is going to be very attracted to the outside areas of the salt. So if you concentrate it in certain areas, you'll get a different crystalline structure than you will elsewhere. And so as you can see here, the pigment is very attracted to where I put the salt, and it's going to add some unique depth to the painting. After you've added your salt, you're going to want to take a brush and just brush away the excess salt so that it doesn't interfere with your different layers. Once removed, you can go back to the process of working from the outside to the inside, adding a layer of water, concentrating pigment around the edge or edges, depending on how you want to, in order to build that unique natural layered look of a geode. I decided when I mixed up my purple mauve color that it was a beautiful color for the inside of the geode, but in order to add some depth, you'll see what I just did was I went in and I took a more pure purple color and I added that to certain areas along the edge to give it a little more depth and a little more interest to the painting. I added some more thin layers on the outside of the main cavity. And this is really just a feel. This is how you want it to look. Geodes, no two geodes look the same. No two elements in nature ever look the same. And so that's really the fun part about painting something like this is you get to decide, is there a thin layer next? Is there a thick layer next? Is it a really deep color? Is it a light color? Is there a color concentrated only on one area of it? I really wanted to give you an idea of what the close-up looked and see how the colors moved within it. But unfortunately, my hand is kind of in the way, so you'll have to use your imagination a bit. But this gives you a little better idea. So I made a thick band here, and I filled it with water. And I probably put a little too much water. You can see it kind of seeping on the edges. And I went back and I did try to take out some of that water or move it around to kind of give a good base color. And then I go in and I really try to add that pigment. And I love the way that it kind of seeps in from the edges. And again, I went and I added some of that just more pure pigmented purple, so it doesn't have so much of the mauve in it on the very edges to kind of give an ode to the other layer that's next to it, that maybe there was a vein of something a little bit more purple pigmented there. The last part of this actual painting that you need to do is the outside layer. And if you haven't ever seen a geode, they're kind of encased in what would be not such a pretty rock. It kind of looks like a dark concrete. It's very uneven. And so what we want to do is we want to add that to add the contrast between the bright jewel colors on the inside. I've mixed up a dark gray with some blue undertones by mixing a couple colors of blue as well as Payne's gray. And instead of the normal technique that I use where I use an entire band and then I add color to it, I find that this is so thin that by the time you make the entire band, it will be too dry at the bottom to add any natural colors. So I kind of work my way up. I make a couple strokes upwards, I add some color, I stroke upwards a little bit more with some water, add some color, and I keep going back and forth as it dries to add color and detail. And again, ideally, you'd be seeing some detail here, but instead you're seeing my hand, which is not super helpful, but again, use your imagination. After I finished my outside layer, I decided that I wanted that inside crystalline structure to have a little more pigment to it, so I went ahead and I added some of that color in my pigment directly around where the salt crystals were, so that once it dried very, very pigmented in those areas. Once I'm done with this, all I need to do is wait. I did wait overnight. I think it would dry in about an hour or two in order for you to be able to get the salt off, but you do want it to be completely dry in order to get the salt off. I rub it with my finger and I brush it off with a dry brush. Final steps, which are always my favorite, are removing the tape. It feels so satisfying to see that clean edge. And now you have a beautiful geode watercolor painting. If you wanted, you could add some additional details. You could make it into a landscape, or you could even do something like making it into a greeting card. I've got a little sample here. I am not the best at lettering, but I do try. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you try this project and have a lot of fun doing it.